Your grandmother had a second life, and your grandfather never knew about it. Somewhere in a shoebox, in the back of a closet, in a house that doesn't exist anymore, there was a coffee can full of cash. Not his cash. Hers. Earned in secret, hidden in plain sight, while the pot roast was in the oven, and the radio was playing, and he thought she was just a housewife. She wasn't just anything. Because behind the aprons and the neighborhood socials and the perfectly ironed tablecloths, an entire underground economy was running through American kitchens in the 1950s. Women were building businesses, making real money, sometimes more than their husbands. And most of the country never saw it coming, because nobody was supposed to be looking. Let's talk about the hustle nobody put in the history books. To understand why this happened at all, you have to understand what these women had just survived. During the war, millions of them worked. They built planes. They welded ships. They ran factories while the men were overseas. And then the war ended, and the men came home, and the message was simple, and it was everywhere. Go back to the kitchen. Take off the coveralls. Be a wife again. Rosie the Riveter didn't disappear. She just went quiet. But here's the thing about a woman who has already proven she can run a rivet gun. You cannot actually put that back in the box. So when the culture told her she couldn't have a job, she found something the culture forgot to ban. A little income of her own. Something with no time clock, no boss standing over her shoulder, and no husband who had to know the number. They called it egg money. That's not a metaphor. It's a real old term, going back generations before the 50s even started. A farm wife would sell the eggs her own hens laid, and by custom, by an unspoken rule nobody wrote down but every woman understood, that money was hers. Not the family's. Hers. She could spend it, save it, or hide it, and nobody asked questions. By the 1950s, egg money didn't just mean eggs anymore. It meant any bit of income a woman kept quietly to herself. And an entire generation of women went looking for their own version of that henhouse. Some of them found it in a plastic bowl. Picture a woman named Brownie. Not famous. Not rich. A divorced single mother in Detroit in the late 1940s, raising a sick little boy alone, at a time when being divorced made you a scandal at every dinner table on the block. She wasn't selling anything glamorous. Cleaning brushes, household goods, whatever paid the rent that month. And then she got her hands on a strange new plastic container nobody could figure out how to seal properly. She started inviting the neighborhood women over. Games first. Then cookies and soft drinks, nothing stronger, because nobody wanted this to look like anything but wholesome. Then she'd show them the bowls. How to press the lid down. How to burp out the air so it locked airtight. The women loved it. But more than that, they loved the 2 hours away from the kids, the husband, the dishes. A little slice of a night that belonged only to them. She built that into an empire. By the time the decade was in full swing, women all over the country were doing exactly what Brownie did in that first living room, and the company built entirely around her idea would not sell in stores at all. If you wanted the bowls, you had to know a hostess. You had to get invited to a party. It became one of the only ways in America a woman could walk into a room, sell something, and walk out with cash in her purse and her dignity fully intact, because in the eyes of the neighborhood, she wasn't working. She was just having friends over. That was the genius of it. And that was the disguise. Because a job outside the home in the 1950s could get you whispered about. But a party? A party was just being a good hostess. Nobody clutched their pearls over a party. So an entire generation of women turned their living rooms into storefronts and their friendships into sales routes and called it socializing, because that's the only word their husbands would accept. And it wasn't just the bowls. There was another woman, a few years earlier, on a farm in New York, who started going door to door with a little black case full of perfume samples. Just a way to make a few extra dollars. She'd knock, chat, leave a sample, come back next week for the order. Women loved having something of their own to buy that had nothing to do with groceries or diapers. That door-to-door perfume case eventually grew into one of the biggest beauty companies on earth, and here's the detail that still gives me chills. It gave thousands of American women their first taste of financial independence before they even had the right to vote. Think about that. She was earning her own money before she was legally allowed to choose the men who made her laws. Then there were the ones who never sold a single product. The quiet ones. The ones with a sewing machine humming in the spare room until midnight, taking in alterations for the whole street. The ones typing manuscripts for a local lawyer, a nickel a page, the clack of the keys echoing through the house after the kids were asleep. The ones baking on order, wedding cakes, birthday cakes, funeral casseroles, cash left on the counter, no questions asked, no receipt needed. The ones taking in boarders, an extra room, an extra income, dressed up as simply being neighborly. None of it had a name on a business license. All of it was real money. And here's what should stop you cold. Some of these women were quietly out-earning their husbands. Not a little. Sometimes by a lot. One woman built her party business into 6 figures a year at a time when the average American home made a few $1,000s total. She went from a divorced mother who couldn't own property in her own name in most states to being featured in magazines, on the cover of business journals, standing on stages telling other women they could build something too. And you have to sit with the cruelty of what came next, because this is not a fairy tale. The company she built into a fortune eventually pushed her out, a falling out with the man at the top, a settlement that barely covered a used car, her name quietly erased from the company's own history, like she had never been there at all, like the empire had built itself. For decades, if you asked people who built that legendary bowl into a household name, almost nobody could tell you it was her. That's the part that hurts the most, isn't it? She wasn't just hiding her income from her husband. History hid her whole story from all of us. But here's what she couldn't erase. Every single one of those women, in every kitchen, sewing room, and living room in America, proved something that the entire decade was built to deny. That a woman with an apron on could also be a woman with a payroll. That just a housewife was never just anything. That the coffee can in the closet wasn't pocket change, it was proof. Proof that she could do it. Proof she'd done it quietly, on her own terms, without asking anyone's permission. Somewhere right now there's an old woman who remembers exactly how much was in that can. Remembers the smell of the casseroles she sold on Fridays, or the particular sound her sewing machine made at 11 at night, or the 2 hours every month she got to be more than somebody's wife. And when she talks about it, if she talks about it at all, there's a little smile that says she's not sorry, not one bit. She built something, quietly, in a decade that told her not to. And honestly, that's not a sad story. That's one of the great untold triumphs of an entire generation of women who were told to sit still, and instead, in their own kitchens, on their own time, built a whole hidden economy that history almost forgot to write down. So next time somebody shows you a photo of a smiling 1950s housewife in a spotless kitchen, look a little closer. Somewhere just out of frame, there might be a shoebox, and in that shoebox, there's a story that never made it into the textbooks. If this one hit you the way it hit me, stick around on this channel. There are more stories like this coming, the real ones, the ones that got left out. Tell me in the comments, did your grandmother or great-grandmother have her own version of egg money? I want to hear it.